Hey, welcome back. This is Ike with Create or Die. Thanks for joining us for the second installment of this free course on creating a Polaroid camera in Blender. Now, if you want to be sure not to miss out on future free courses or even the next part or two of this course, be sure to like and subscribe now. We really appreciate it. So yeah, like, subscribe. That's right. All right. Without further ado, let's get at it. So we're going to go ahead and select those faces from the eject button that we don't want, and just leaving the one eject button on the right side of the Polaroid camera. And then using Command R, we're going to add some edge loops on the back panel. Use some edge slide technique. We're pushing and pulling faces and edges just to get a little bit closer, less blocky, preparing for some more shape. And you'll notice that I'm cutting in some new edge flow here so that I can ensure that we keep the model as clean as possible at this stage, and having the edges flow and create those boundaries for those kind of sections of the model. And then I'm going to bevel the edges, Command B, and then remember you can scroll on your scroll wheel to add more segments. We're just eyeballing it based on what we're seeing in the reference. You'll notice here on this front panel, it adds some extra geometry there on the side as it merges with that single line. So I'm just going to dissolve the faces and merge those shapes together. Again, keeping things simplified as well as prepping for beveling. Okay, and then inset with eye, that front face to start to define some more geometry for the front. And then we're just going to remove the extra polygon that process created and close the gap with in edge mode. And you can see I like to jump around the model so that we're improving things as far as detail, across the board, not just focusing on one area, making that perfect. It's like if you've ever worked on a drawing, it's better to rough out the entire image and then do your second pass over the entire image and then start detailing in passes. Okay, so now we're going to bevel the back kind of angled edge there of the Polaroid camera. You can see down there in that bottom corner, it's not exactly true to reference, and I think I may go back and fix that later, but in the end, it's this is your camera. How do you want it to be? And in that case, maybe it's easier to not make it exactly the same, or maybe you think you're making improvements on the design of this thing. There's no right and wrong when it comes to modeling something for yourself. And then I'm going in and removing some extra vertices that were left behind from dissolving faces or edges earlier. Then back to the front, I'm going to create a much tighter bevel here, because if you look at the reference, that white plastic in this area at least has some tight bevels. And it probably would have been a good idea to select this next ring of edges here at the same time, just to ensure that I got them exactly right. Merge some faces or dissolve some faces to avoid crazy topology when beveling. And in the end, we'll use some tools to detect that that we don't have any n-gons, any polygons with more than 4 vertices. And you can see I'm just barely saving. You should definitely do that earlier in the process. Okay, let's focus on the lens. That big thing there in the center of the front of the camera. Some interesting challenges here with the internal bevel. If you look at it closely, there's steps that go down to the actual glass lens. So just combination of scale and G along the y-axis to move things around and get what I'm looking for. Okay, now Shift A to add a sphere, and just scale that down and rotate it and on the X, RX, and then Control to snap it to 90-degree angles and position that roughly into place. We're going to select some of these faces that we don't need and just keep what we do need. Push that back. Position that all nice and centered now. Okay. Now onto the steps. You can see I'll do a couple here in the recording and then just jump forward because it's essentially the same process over and over again. All the way down, and I'm sure there are better ways to do this. I just couldn't think of it at the moment. There's probably some type of bevel with a custom curve in the shape of stairs or some mathematical formula I could place on on the thing, but sometimes you just got to brute force it, and as long as it looks good, that's all that matters. Okay, then let's add a subdivision modifier to it to see how it looks when more geometry is added. Essentially, you can see a lot of pieces are getting all squishy and out of shape because they don't have enough geometry on the edges to hold the shape. Okay, then we'll just hide that effect of the subdivision surface and select these rings all the way down. And then once we get those all selected, we're going to right click and select Mark Sharp. And then you'll see there's a cyan line to represent that they're marked sharp. So it's a little crisper. If we right click and do the shade auto smooth, I think that will help in the end as well. And now to wrap up the lens, we're just going to add some more edge loops to tighten areas up, and just kind of explore, just trial and error for yourself on how many you need and where they should be placed. Okay, on to the knob or the dial on the front of this thing. Okay, and as I extrude that out and compare it to the lens, I can see that my lens is probably set a little too far into the camera, so pull that out. First we're going to add an edge loop down the middle of the knob, because if you'll refer to the reference, you can see that it's essentially different on the bottom half than it is on the top half. Shift S to scale along the normals, scale that in, and then add some more geometry just to sharpen up the bottom of that knob. Then we're going to select the center edge here and do edge split. So now those are two separate pieces that make up the knob. And this way we can get the extra geometry needed at the top of this thing. So I'm going to subdivide and then remove that. Okay. And I'm looking for subdivide smooth like in other programs, and I'm not finding it. So rather than spend a bunch of time looking for the right solution, I decided to brute force it once again. So subdivide it, remove that center edge, and then select every other edge on the flat part, and then hit 1 to go into front view, orthographic view, and then just scale those up until they make what looks like a smooth rounded shape. And then we'll select all of these edges here at the top of the knob along this ring loop. And then Command B to bevel, good old scroll wheel to go down to just one segment. Okay, looking good. Okay, now bevel those again. And then select every other face. And again, I think there's a faster way to select these. I just recently learned about it, but I didn't use it here. It's under select. There's like a checkerboard option where you can kind of give it some instructions on which edges or which faces or whatever you're looking to select. So something to dig into. Okay, and then we're going to hit I to inset those, and then Shift S to scale along the normal, which will push them all out. So now we've got something that's looking pretty close to that detail on the upper knob. And then Command R, add some edge loops to tighten, sharpen that area. And then go ahead and hit I to inset that front face. Okay, and then we're going to hide the upper part of the knob. select the ring of edges, F to create a face, and then inset those. And now we have a knob that looks like one piece, but really it's two pieces. We'll add some more geometry to sharpen that up. Hit slash on the numpad to go into solo mode and just focus on the object that is selected. And then we can work on these back faces that are hidden inside of the camera body. Alright, so now we're going to slice in some edges to create some panel breaks. With this upper section here, we can just go into side mode and select the points that we need, move those up on the bottom, and then when we're in x-ray mode like this, we can just easily select and deselect the points that we need all the way or don't need all the way through the model. Now we select these edges at the corner, hit EX to extrude them back on the x-axis, and then grab those two edges, Command B to bevel those. And then we'll select those new polygons that we don't need and delete them. This leaves us with those nice rounded corners. Okay, on to the button. The red button on the front of this camera. So right now we're insetting the piece that will act as the housing for the button that will be part of the white plastic eventually. And then Shift D, that big N-gon to create the button. And we extrude it out, and finding a better angle on the button, grab those edges and bevel them until we get something that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm just sharpening things up a little bit by beveling and adding edge loops. Alright, it's looking good. Hide the button to get some of the geometry that is behind it. And then can unhide the button, Option H. Then we're on to the eyepiece. And so it's just a matter of doing what we've been doing up to this point. Adding geometry. I went ahead and closed off those faces by selecting the edges and hitting F. Command R to cut in some new loop slices. Pushing and pulling of faces. Inset that face, push it back with G, Y. Again, referring to what's going on in our reference. Okay. It's just the same steps repeated again and again. And it can be time consuming and a little laborious, but it's good. Now we're going to split that eyepiece away from the rubber gasket that goes around it. and make those two separate pieces. This will help as we round it out here. So we're going to select the edge loops on each of those corners, and then Command B to bevel those out to give us the rounded shape that we see in the reference. And then it's just a matter of going around beveling, adding edge loops, pushing, pulling with move and scale to flesh this here thing out. Sure, go ahead and extrude those edges for good measure. And we, those pieces don't need to be watertight. We're not printing this, 3D printing this. We're just concerned with what the camera's going to see. Okay, the back housing. And I consider this this longer piece of the eyepiece, if you will, as part of the back housing. Deleted that back face so that I could get bevels to match what I did on the eyepiece. You can see we're getting some weirdness, so something's not right with this loop of edges. So let's just go ahead and make sure all those vertices are merged. Bevel that again. And we're just removing some of these faces to help with the union of the eyepiece and the slanted piece back there in the back housing, if you will. Then I've identified another area where I can extrude EX those edges, and this is because we need to add rounded bevel corners. Okay, once we're happy with that, we can select our new faces and delete those. And eventually what we'll be doing is merging this eyepiece with that back kind of triangular shaped piece so that it's one piece, if you will, and looks smooth just like it does in the reference material. And again, you got to ask yourself, is this model worth going to that level of detail or not? What is it going to be used for, and so forth. Now I've decided that this bevel is actually tapers as it goes towards the front of the camera. So I've got to remove this edge loop to ensure that we can get a consistent tapered bevel. So I'm going to go into snap mode, vertex snap mode, and then we're going to snap these points in place, and they snap even though they're on different object layers. Turn snapping off, and then we're going to move this, just kind of eyeball it, this new set of points away from being exactly on top of the points, because you can see there's a lip there that we want to maintain. Okay, now I can see that going to be tricky to try to move these points to line up where I want, so to the eyepiece. Instead, I'll just use the bisect slice tool to slice right through the eyepiece to get something that matches the triangular angle in the background. Okay, now we've got two pieces that are looking good. On to the film tray. Again, you can see I'm jumping around. Okay, and in front mode, just inspecting things and referring to my reference, and I can see that the bezel is a little thicker at the bottom, and the bevel on the inner part of that bezel is tighter. So I'm just moving points by hand here in front view to get something that looks correct. Okay, once I have that, I'm going to select that middle face, EY, to extrude that into the background, remove that extra polygon it created in the center. You can see it tapers in. It's not just straight back. So pushing and pulling edges and faces, referring to the reference always. Alright, now we can select that face, push it back. Let's select it again, hit Shift D, Y to pull it forward. You can see we got to chop off the bottom because we have that rounded beveled edge. Isn't quite right. Yep, don't forget to delete those faces that are created on the middle axis whenever you extrude. Okay, we're going to slice right through here, and this will become that front tray piece. Extrude that out. And we're insetting that front face, we're removing that extra polygon, closing the gap, closing the hole. Okay, it's looking good. Side tabs. Now these are just some little tabs that I think are there in case you were to add the flash attachment to your Polaroid camera. That gives it something to hold on to. So we're just going to add some cubes, scale in edit mode to get it roughly the size we want. Remember, you can scale on one axis, in this case SY. And grab that top edge, bevel it in, again to mimic what we're seeing in the reference. Okay, on to that front face piece. We're gonna give it a little bit more love. You know, we added the lens and the dial and the button, and now we need to make those integrate with this front face. First, we're gonna add the indentation for that little rainbow strip on the front of the camera. Then you got to think, if this were doubled up, double the thickness, is that about right? Because this is being mirrored. Then we use the knife tool, K, to draw a shape that's close to the shape of our lens. So now it's out of that geometry. And now go into point mode, hit 1, and we can snap on the vertex if you like, and then move those points to the edges of the lens. Get it to match as best as possible. Okay, looking good. So now if we solo this piece, we can see what's left. Let's remove those faces, and now we've got a hole in our geometry. And then we're gonna edge split here and extrude back the area that is the rainbow stripe. And then we got to remove those faces on top because created some extra stuff. Those faces along the middle, along the mirror piece, need to be removed as well. Alright, then drawing with the knife tool a circle around the knob, nudging those into place. And then what we're doing is beveling that new edge that we created, and that just creates, it just kind of builds some topology around our, an edge loop, a ring of faces to ensure that that holds tight when we go to add more geometry and break up this face in the detailing stage. You can see I changed my mode to normal, so that way when I move or scale, it'll scale it along that plane of faces here, rather than according to the world or local axis. Now go back to global or world axis, scale back a piece, so this is all indented, and really this is where symmetry has been broken, and so I just cut a hole on both sides. You can see that I don't need, but we'll remedy that. Okay, so we've made that face its own object, and then we've applied the add modifier in object mode, so it's no longer symmetrical. I mean, it is, but things that we change on one side won't affect the other. So now we can make some changes here. But first I'm getting rid of some of this extra geometry from extruding it in, because this button works a little differently. Okay, normal mode, scale that up, so now we have some edge loops around this area to help keep the shape, and this matches up perfectly with the cylinder housing around the button. So we've separated that, and then we select cam body face and cam pieces .001 and Command J to join those together. Delete the pieces we don't need or we won't be merging. And then with snapping on, just snapping those points into place. And then selecting them all, merge vertices, M by distance. Then grab that loop. Oh, we've got an extra face back there, so it's not going to bevel. Delete that face. Command B to bevel that. Now that's part of the front face. It looks super clean. Drawing a box around the area that will become the one-step kind of badge sticker housing. Beveling the edges on that. Get rid of the new geometry we don't need. Create a face that's rounded. Extrude that in slightly. And then we want to clean up some of this extra geometry that was created. Yeah, we're going to do a slight bevel. Inset that edge. Okay, now we're going to cut out another rectangle for the viewfinder lens piece, creating some geometry that'll work better for me as I do this. We're just going to delete that placeholder and grab the face, inset it, push it back, scale, delete. You can see I beveled those edges separately because this is again one of those tapered bevels where the outer bevel is bigger than the inner bevel. Then it's just a matter of using your knife tool in there to cut some new geometry, some new edge flow. And things like this, it's like, oh man, I wish there was a better way, there was a tool to do this. And guess what? There might be, some settings on the bevel tool. But it's good to know how to do it, manually as well. And this keeps us moving forward. Sometimes it's hard to even know what to Google or, search for in YouTube to find the answer. So that's why it's important to just watch a lot of tutorials, and eventually you'll hear someone drop a little quick tip that would have saved you a ton of time and you feel so used. That's good. Okay, just starting to create some of that topology that will make up the final face. Just trying to figure out a good way to get rid of this extra weird geometry that is created sometimes when we bevel things. And if we just try to delete all of these edges, then Blender's going to wig out and it won't let you do it, and it'll continue to throw edges in there because it doesn't want to deal with some massive end-gon that has a hole in the middle or multiple holes, and try to figure all that out. So the more you can split it up, realizing that things can be changed later, the better. Create a face from that edge loop. We're going to split it. This is going to be our stand-in for that viewfinder lens for now. And there you have it. Just like that. We've taken this Polaroid model to yet a whole nother level. Alright, there you have it. Part 2 completed. How's your Polaroid camera coming along? Probably pretty sweet, I bet. You learned a thing or two, hopefully. And again, if you don't want to miss out on part 3, be sure to like and subscribe. And hit that little bell icon so you'll get the notification, right? Oh, you like this hat? Get yours at createordie.net. Yeah. Show your support for reals. Thanks for joining us.